Hi, I'm Mark Tyson, the guy behind Illuminated Infamy. Don't let my Santa Claus-like appearance fool you. I'm your slightly dangerous professor, and tonight we're going to talk about some dangerous books and probably some dangerous people as well. So sit back, relax, and we'll get started with the Grand Grimoire, which is the book we have up first.
In 1750, a French bookseller in Paris began quietly selling a text he refused to put in his shop window. He kept it behind the counter. He sold it only to customers he knew, or customers referred by someone he trusted. He charged considerably more than the book's production cost justified. And when asked what the book was, he described it as a devotional text for serious practitioners. The book was the Grand Grimoire. The bookseller knew exactly what it was. He sold it anyway, because there was demand, and because in 18th century Paris, the risk of prosecution for selling occult literature was manageable if you were careful. The risk of what the book described was someone else's problem. What it is. The Grand Grimoire is a manual for summoning the devil, not a metaphor for the devil, not a psychological exercise using the devil as a symbol. The actual devil, or more precisely, his prime minister, a demon named Lucifuge Rofocael, who in the Grimoire's cosmology administers hell's day-to-day operations, while Satan concerns himself with larger matters. The book provides everything a practitioner would need. A specific location for the ritual, a crossroads, ideally at midnight. The materials required, including items most practitioners would have found extremely difficult to source. The precise words of invocation, in Latin, with pronunciation guides. The protective circle that keeps the summoned entity from harming the summoner. And the contract, a physical document the practitioner signs with their blood, exchanging their soul for whatever they've come to request. It is structured less like a mystical text and more like a legal procedure. There is very little poetry in the Grand Grimoire. It reads like a manual for operating dangerous equipment. This is, most historians agree, precisely why it terrified people as much as it did. The question of origin. The Grand Grimoire claims to be ancient. The text itself asserts it was compiled by a figure named Eliphas the Egyptian, drawing on the wisdom of Solomon, the biblical king whose legendary control over demons formed the foundation of a large portion of Western occult tradition. Solomon's seal, Solomon's key, the Testament of Solomon. The entire tradition of ceremonial magic traces part of its lineage back to this one king who may or may not have existed, and whose supernatural abilities are described in texts that appeared roughly 1,000 years after his alleged reign. The Grand Grimoire wanted that lineage. Claiming Solomonic origin gave it authority. What historians have actually established is considerably less ancient. The earliest confirmed copies date to the 18th century, with most scholars placing its composition somewhere between 1750 and 1800. The probable location is France, possibly Paris, possibly one of the southern provinces where occult publishing was somewhat more tolerated. The author is unknown. What is not in dispute is the speed with which it spread. Within decades of its first confirmed appearance, copies had been reported in France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and through the trade networks connecting Catholic Europe in the colonies of the New World. Louisiana, in particular, developed a documented relationship with the Grand Grimoire through the intersection of French colonial culture and the emerging traditions of New Orleans voodoo. There are court records from New Orleans in the early 19th century referencing the book by name. It traveled fast for a text that was supposed to be suppressed. The Church's response. The Catholic Church maintained the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books, from 1559 until 1966. 4 centuries of officially catalogued literature that Catholics were forbidden to read. The Grand Grimoire is not on it. This is strange. The Church put everything on that list. Protestant theology, Copernican astronomy, novels deemed morally corrupting, Descartes, Voltaire, Victor Hugo, The Church was not shy about using the index as an instrument of intellectual control, and it had no particular tolerance for occult literature. Most grimoires of the period appear on the index. The Grand Grimoire does not. The explanation that has circulated in occult scholarship for roughly 2 centuries is that the Church made a deliberate decision not to acknowledge the book publicly, on the grounds that inclusion on the index would legitimize it, that naming it would make it more sought after than ignoring it, that the safest response to the most dangerous grimoire in existence was institutional silence. There is a second explanation, quieter and less sourced, which is that the Vatican did not merely avoid acknowledging the book, they collected it. That somewhere in the Vatican Apostolic Archive, the most restricted library in the world, there is a copy of the Grand Grimoire, obtained by the Church precisely because they wanted to ensure no one else could use it. The Vatican has not confirmed this. They have not denied it either. The Grand Grimoire remained in print continuously from its 18th century appearance through to the present day. It has never gone out of circulation. Various editions have been published in French, Italian, Spanish, and English. Academic translations with full scholarly annotation exist. You can buy one tonight. What you will find, if you do, is a book that is simultaneously completely mundane and deeply unsettling to spend time with. The mundane part is that it is old, it is repetitive in places, and its cosmology requires a set of beliefs most modern readers don't hold. The unsettling part is harder to articulate. It is the specificity, the confidence, the complete absence of the hedging language you find in philosophical or theological texts, the maybes, the allegorical readings. The this is a metaphor for spiritual growth disclaimers. The Grand Grimoire does not offer a metaphor for spiritual growth. It offers a name, a location, a time, a set of materials, and a contract. It is written by someone who believed that if you followed the instructions precisely, something would show up. Whether you share that belief or not, spending time with a document written in that register has an effect that is difficult to fully explain. Most people who read it put it down faster than they expected to.
Okay, now you know what the Grand Grimoire is about, and kind of know a little bit about it. Well, why is it also called the Red Dragon? Well, it's called the Red Dragon because of, it's kind of a, disturbing reason of what it requires. So, the next video is going to be talking about why the Grand Grimoire is called the Red Dragon. I will see you at the other side of the video.
Every dangerous book has a reputation. The reputation of the Grand Grimoire is not that it is frightening to read. The reputation is that it works. That distinction matters. Most grimoires of the medieval and early modern period are studied today as historical artifacts. They are windows into how people once understood the relationship between the natural and supernatural world. Scholars read them. Academics annotate them. They belong, in most professional assessments, to the category of things people used to believe. The Grand Grimoire occupies a different position. Among the practitioners who take it seriously, among the historians who have studied it most carefully, and among the occultists who collect dangerous texts but won't keep this one, the conversation is not about what people used to believe. It is about what the book claims to do, and the persistent, uncomfortable question of whether it does it. The name. The book has 2 names. The Grand Grimoire is the formal title. The Red Dragon is what practitioners call it, and have called it since at least the early 19th century, when references to Le Dragon Rouge begin appearing in French occult literature with some regularity. The color is not symbolic. The Grand Grimoire's most significant rituals require blood, not symbolically, not as a gesture. Blood as a functional material component, specifically the practitioner's own blood, used in 2 distinct ways. The first is the contract. The pact with Lucifuge Rofocale, the grimoire insists, must be signed in the practitioner's blood, not ink. The document exchanging your soul for whatever you've come to request requires a biological signature. The reasoning given in the text is that a blood signature cannot be forged, disputed, or later denied. Hell, apparently, has very firm views on contract enforcement. The second use is the protective circle. The barrier between the practitioner and whatever is summoned requires components that the grimoire lists with the precision of a recipe, and blood is among them. Red Dragon. The name is accurate. Lucifuge Rofocale. The entity the Grand Grimoire is designed to summon is not Satan. This is a detail that surprises most people when they encounter it. The Grand Grimoire operates from a specific demonological cosmology in which hell functions as a bureaucracy, a hierarchy of named entities with specific domains, ranks, and responsibilities. Satan, in this cosmology, is the supreme authority, but he does not handle individual human transactions. He delegates. His prime minister is Lucifuge Rofocale. The name itself is constructed from Latin roots, roughly translated, he who flees the light, which the grimoire acknowledges directly, noting that this particular entity cannot tolerate sunlight and must be summoned after dark, at a specific crossroads, under specific celestial conditions. Lucifuge Rofocale's job, in the grimoire's framing, is administration. He controls wealth and can grant it. He controls the material resources of the earth and can direct them. He has 3 subordinate demons under his command, each with their own specializations, and the Grand Grimoire provides their names, their sigils, the specific words that compel them, and the hierarchy of command. The detail that historians find most interesting is not the demon's name. It is the grimoire's insistence on proper procedure. The text is emphatic that Lucifuge Rofocale does not want to appear. He will resist. He will send the subordinate demons first to discourage the practitioner. He will attempt to negotiate a lesser transaction. The practitioner must be firm, must hold the circle, must repeat the compulsion until the entity complies. A summoning manual that acknowledges the thing being summoned would rather not be summoned. That detail, whatever you make of it, is not what a fraud writes. The crossroads ritual. The summoning itself is structured in precise steps. The location is a crossroads, specifically one that has not been recently traveled. The time is midnight. The practitioner must arrive alone. The circle is drawn on the ground using the specified materials. The grimoire's protective sigils are placed at specific compass points. The candles, if used, must be a specific color. The first invocation is spoken aloud. Then the practitioner waits. The Grand Grimoire's instructions for what happens next are the section most practitioners describe as the part that stays with them. The text describes a period of atmospheric disturbance that precedes the appearance of the entity. Wind where there was no wind, a drop in temperature, sounds at the edge of perception. Then, the text says, something arrives at the edge of the circle. The practitioner must not step outside the circle for any reason. This instruction is given 3 times in the space of 2 paragraphs, which in a text as spare as the Grand Grimoire constitutes emphasis. What happens to someone who steps outside the circle is not described in explicit detail. The Grimoire says only that the protections cease to apply. From context, the implication is sufficient. The Grand Grimoire's blood rituals, its hierarchy of demons, its insistence on procedural precision, all of this could be dismissed as elaborate theater, the kind of ritualistic framework that gives practitioners a sense of control over a process they've invested with meaning. That dismissal is reasonable. What it doesn't fully account for is the consistency. Across different cultural contexts, different centuries, different practitioners with no connection to each other, the reports attached to the Grand Grimoire's rituals describe the same things: the atmospheric disturbance, the temperature drop, the sense of something present at the boundary of the circle. Whether that consistency reflects a shared delusion, a shared psychological response to extreme ritual conditions, or something the Church decided it was safer not to name officially, is a question the historical record declines to answer. The Red Dragon keeps its secrets.
Alright, now you know why the Grand Grimoire is called the Red Dragon. So the next step is to find out what the Grand Grimoire actually instructs you to do. And if you've come this far with the Grand Grimoire, you know that the tools required to enact the rituals and stuff are not obtained in a very humanitarian way. But anyway, I will let you watch the video, and I will see you on the other side.
Most books about dangerous things describe the danger from a safe distance. The Grand Grimoire does not do this. It addresses you directly. It says when you arrive, when you draw the circle, when the entity appears. It is written as an instruction manual for someone who intends to follow it, not someone who wants to understand it academically, not someone curious about the history of occult practice, someone who intends to go to a crossroads at midnight and summon a demon. For that person, the Grand Grimoire is extremely thorough. Step 1. Preparation. The Grimoire's instructions begin weeks before the ritual itself. The practitioner must spend a period of preparation during which they clarify, in writing, what they intend to request. The Grand Grimoire is specific on this point. Vague requests produce vague results. You must know what you want before you go. You must be able to state it in a single sentence. The contract you will sign in blood must contain exact terms, because Lucifuge Rofocale, the text warns, is a precise reader. During the preparation period, the practitioner must also acquire the materials for the ritual circle. The Grimoire provides a list. Some items are mundane, some are not. The text does not indicate where one obtains the less mundane items. On the apparent assumption that a person serious enough to attempt this ritual is serious enough to figure that out, the practitioner must also select the crossroads. The Grimoire specifies a location that has not been traveled recently, ideally one away from populated areas. The reasoning given is practical. Witnesses complicate the ritual. Whether the complication is legal, procedural, or something else, the text declines to specify. Step 2. The circle. At midnight, the practitioner arrives at the crossroads alone and draws the circle. The Grand Grimoire's protective circle is specific in its dimensions, its materials, and its symbols. The sigils placed at each compass point correspond to the names of the entities being invoked and the protections being claimed. The Grimoire reproduces these sigils in the text, drawn with the kind of precision that suggests whoever composed this section understood that an incorrectly drawn sigil was not merely ineffective. It was an invitation. The candles are placed. The materials are arranged. The practitioner steps inside the circle. They do not step back out. This is not a suggestion. Step 3. The invocation. The first invocation is in Latin. The Grand Grimoire provides the full text. Read aloud. It is a command, not a request. It does not ask Lucifuge Rofocale to appear. It compels him. It invokes the authority of God, of Christ, and of the specific hierarchy of divine names that the Grimoire's cosmology holds as binding on infernal entities. The assumption built into the text is that these names have power, that the demon is subject to them whether he wishes to be or not, and that the practitioner, standing inside the correct circle, with the correct sigils, having spoken the correct words, has temporarily positioned themselves inside a structure of authority that the entity cannot simply ignore. Then the practitioner waits. The Grimoire says the first invocation frequently produces no visible result. This is expected. The practitioner speaks the second invocation, a stronger compulsion, then the third. At the third invocation, the text says something changes in the atmosphere. Step 4. The appearance. The Grand Grimoire describes what happens next with the same flat precision it uses for the rest of the ritual. Wind rises, temperature drops. There is sound at the boundary of perception, described in different translations as either a rushing or a low sustained tone that the practitioner feels more than hears. And then something appears at the edge of the circle. The grimoire does not describe what it looks like. This is the only place in the entire text where the procedural precision breaks down and the absence is striking. Every other step is specified. Materials, measurements, words, timing, all of it exact. The appearance of the entity is described only as a presence, a form, something at the boundary. The practitioner must not react with fear. The grimoire is emphatic on this. Fear is readable. Lucifuge Rofocale will negotiate from any position of advantage he can find, and a frightened practitioner is a practitioner who may accept worse contract terms than they came for. The practitioner states their request, clearly, in the exact terms they prepared. The negotiation begins. The Grand Grimoire does not tell you how the negotiation ends. It tells you how to conduct it. It tells you what to insist on and what to concede. It tells you how to finalize the contract, sign it, and close the ritual. What it does not tell you is what happens afterward, what it costs, what changes. The text ends with the circle being dissolved and the practitioner leaving the crossroads. What they carry with them is their own concern.
Okay, just so you guys know, all the videos, or most of the videos in this deep dive or this long form video are expanded shorts. So one of my most popular shorts that I came up with was the man who didn't believe in the grimoire until he tried it. I can never say his name correctly. That's why, if you wonder why I use the AI voice, it's because of this. Eliphas Levi. Anyway, Eliphas Levi went ahead and attempted it. From what I understand, the disturbing part is that he actually got the tools to do the ritual, which, it requires black cats and sacrifices and stuff like that, which are horrifying. But from what I understand, from what I've read, he obtained these tools from somebody else who made them. A lot of times, the practitioners of these rituals gained the tools from, they bought them somewhere else, which, since it requires such precision, and if something goes wrong, the entity can actually kill you. I don't know if I would trust somebody else to, here, I made this tool, I did all the requirements, here you go, why don't you use it? I'd be like, well, I don't know. Hopefully you're reputable. But anyway, he tried it apparently, and it did not go well for him. Now, in the original short, it said he ran away from the circle, which it says don't run out of the circle. So this video gives a little bit more context. It expands it a little bit. So I will see you at the other side of the video.
There is a difference between studying something and doing it. Historians study the Grand Grimoire. Scholars catalog it. Collectors own it. Academics annotate it with footnotes and publish papers about its place in the tradition of Western occult literature. Eliphas Levi did all of those things. And then, in July of 1854, in a rented apartment in London, he stopped studying. What happened that night is the most documented first-hand account of a grimoire ritual in the historical record. Levi wrote about it extensively. He described it in letters, in published books, in private correspondence that survived him. He never fully explained it. He never recanted it. And he spent the rest of his life, another 30 years, unable to fully account for what he saw. This is his story. Who Levi was. Alphonse Louis Constant was born in Paris in 1810, the son of a shoemaker. He was brilliant, poor, and deeply religious, which in 19th century France was a combination with a fairly predictable trajectory, the church. He entered seminary. He was talented enough to advance quickly, and by his mid-20s, he was close to ordination as a Catholic priest. Then two things happened that derailed him. The first was a woman. Levi fell in love with a student he was teaching. The relationship was not physically consummated, but it was enough for his superiors to question his commitment to celibacy. He was given the choice between the woman and ordination. He chose the woman. She left him anyway. The second thing was harder to resolve. Levi had begun reading. Not the approved curriculum, but everything. The Kabbalah, the Hermetic texts, the Neoplatonic philosophers, the alchemical tradition. He had started to develop a theory, one that would eventually make him the most influential occultist of the 19th century. All of these traditions were describing the same underlying reality using different symbolic languages. He was expelled from seminary in 1836. He spent the next 2 decades writing, lecturing, and building the intellectual framework that would eventually be published as Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, the book that defined Western ceremonial magic for the next 150 years. He took the pen name Eliphas Levi, a Hebrew translation of his birth name. He did not publicly believe in what he was writing about. He described the rituals, the entities, the cosmology with genuine intellectual respect as a system, a coherent, internally consistent symbolic structure for understanding reality. He was, by his own account, a scholar, a historian of ideas, not a practitioner. And then a woman named Jane wrote him a letter. The invitation. In the spring of 1854, Levi traveled to London. The trip was professional, meetings with English occultists, the growing network of people interested in the serious study of magical tradition. Among the people he met was a woman identified in his writings only as a lady adept, later believed to be a figure associated with early spiritualist circles in England. She had read his work. She was impressed, and she made him a proposal. She had a private chamber. She had the materials required. She had studied the specific ritual in question for years and had never attempted it, because she believed it required a practitioner of sufficient knowledge and will, someone who understood the theory deeply enough to hold the structure. She believed Levi was that person. She wanted him to perform the evocation of Apollonius of Tyana, a first-century philosopher and alleged wonder-worker, using the ritual structure drawn from the Grimoire tradition. Levi's account records that he hesitated for 3 weeks. Then he agreed. The ritual. Levi performed the ritual on 3 consecutive nights before anything occurred. He describes the preparation in detail: the white robe, the ritual instruments, a sword, a cup, specific other objects whose acquisition he describes as difficult. The chamber arranged according to the prescribed specifications. The hours of preliminary invocation that preceded the main working. The first night, nothing. The second night, Levi describes a sensation of being watched, a heaviness in the air of the chamber. He ended the session before completing the full ritual. He attributed this, at the time, to his own imagination. He had been fasting as part of the preparation, which he noted could produce suggestibility. The third night, he completed the full working. His account of what happened is precise and strange, and has been quoted in occult literature ever since, not because it is dramatic, but because it is reluctant. Levi was not a man who wanted to report what he reported. He describes a figure appearing within the apparatus of the ritual, tall, draped, the face obscured. He does not describe it as a ghost, a demon, or a supernatural entity. He describes it as a presence that occupied space in a way that was not consistent with an hallucination. He asked it 2 questions. He had prepared 2 questions before the ritual written down, so that whatever state he might be in during the working, he would remember what he came for. He reports that both questions were answered. He does not record what the questions were. He does not record what the answers were. In his published account, he states that the answers were personal and could not be shared. In private letters written shortly after, he indicates only that one answer confirmed something he had hoped was untrue, and one answer he was unable to fully understand at the time. He ended the ritual. He collapsed. He describes being physically ill for several days afterward, unable to eat, unable to write, lying in the rented apartment, trying to process what had happened. He wrote to the woman who had arranged the ritual. She responded with a short note. He describes her response as unsurprised. The aftermath. Levi published his account. Not immediately and not in full, but he included a version of it in Dogma and Ritual of High Magic. which appeared in 1856, 2 years after the ritual. The account caused exactly the kind of problem you would expect. Skeptics argued that a man who had fasted for days, in a darkened room, surrounded by ritual objects he had spent weeks investing with symbolic significance, had experienced a perfectly predictable psychological event: suggestion, sensory deprivation, the kind of vision that the human brain produces when given sufficient input and insufficient sleep. Levi's response to this argument was interesting. He did not dispute it. He said that this explanation and the other explanation, that something genuinely appeared, were not necessarily mutually exclusive. He had spent 30 years building a theory of magic as a technology for accessing real things through the mechanism of trained consciousness. If the ritual had used his own consciousness as the instrument of contact, that was, in his framework, how it was supposed to work. This answer satisfied almost nobody. It was not designed to. What he never did was deny the experience. Not once in the remaining 30 years of his life. He was questioned about it repeatedly, challenged by skeptics, pressed by believers who wanted more detail. His answer remained consistent. Something appeared. The questions were answered. He could not fully explain it, and he was not going to pretend otherwise. He died in 1875. His work on the Kabbalah, on tarot symbolism, on the theoretical framework of ceremonial magic, became the foundation that every major occult movement of the following century built on. Aleister Crowley considered him his most significant predecessor and claimed in his own writings to be the reincarnation of him, born the year the man died. Whether that claim means anything, whether any of it means anything, depends on questions that remain unresolved. Levi went to a crossroads, in a manner of speaking. He came back with answers he never fully shared.
Okay, now we're going to transition into the pacts with the devil. And this is the first one that we're going to talk about. It's going to be the origin of the Codex Gigas. Sorry. Again, now you know why I do the AI voice on videos. But I have used my own voice on some of the videos, like the earlier videos, but I had a hard time keeping up with the pace. So the AI video may be irritating sometimes, but I try to pick the most soothing voice, and I do go in and edit and make sure that he pronounces things as well as I can pronounce them. But there might be some mispronunciations here and there, but not on purpose. I hate that when you watch a video that is AI voiced and they don't go back and check, and they're just churning them out, and they don't check to make sure they're pronouncing things correctly. But anyway, I always do. The only reason I use it is because I flub up a lot, so it would take me forever to get through a video, so it's just easier, and it's more soothing to listen to anyway, I'm rambling. So what we're going to talk about next is the first monk who made a pact with the devil. He was going to be executed, and so he made a deal like, I want to write the book of this history of the world if just let me in. They're like, okay, we'll give you one night. And so he supposedly wrote the Codex Gigas on one night, but he supposedly had help, because on one of the pages, it's a full-page portrait of the devil, who supposedly helped him write the Codex Gigas. The most interesting part about this next video that I think is, for me anyway, is at one point where they were holding the Gigas was going to be burning, and they tossed it out the window. And anyway. So I'm sorry, I'm easily amused with that. But anyway, I can imagine someone trying to catch it, and it's this big giant book. That's what Gigas means, and he's under like, okay, throw it out. Anyway, I'm sorry. So this is the Codex Gigas, and I will see you on the other side of the video.
In the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, there is a book that requires 2 people to carry it. It is 36 inches tall, nearly 20 inches wide, 8.7 inches thick. It weighs 165 pounds. It contains 310 leaves of vellum, which required the processed skins of approximately 160 donkeys to produce. It is the largest manuscript in the world. It has been in continuous existence for over 800 years. It has survived wars, fires, a defenestration from a burning building during the Siege of Prague in 1648, and the general catastrophic attrition that destroys most medieval manuscripts long before they reach the modern era. It contains the complete Latin Bible, several additional historical and medical texts, a calendar of saints, and a full-page illuminated portrait of the devil. It is called the Codex Gigas. Most people call it the Devil's Bible. The legend. The legend of the Codex Gigas begins in the early 13th century at the Benedictine monastery of Podlavis in Bohemia, in what is now the Czech Republic. A monk, whose name has not survived, broke his monastic vows so severely that the prescribed punishment was death. The specific manner of execution selected for a monk who broke his vows in this period was to be walled alive into a cell, left there until the wall sealed completely. The monk requested a reprieve. He offered a transaction. He would produce in a single night a manuscript so comprehensive, so magnificent, that it would bring glory to the monastery forever, a testament to God that would outlast everyone who had ever lived there. The monastery's leadership, perhaps curious, perhaps simply willing to delay the execution, agreed. If the manuscript was complete by morning, the monk would live. By midnight, by some accounts, by the first hours after midnight by others, the monk had realized that he could not do it. Not alone, not in one night, not in 100 nights. And so, the legend says, he made another offer. He sold his soul to the devil in exchange for the manuscript's completion. The devil obliged. By morning, the Codex Gigas was done. As a gesture of gratitude, or possibly as a form of commemorating the transaction, the monk included a full-page portrait of his collaborator. That portrait is still there. The devil portrait. The illustration that appears on folio 290 of the Codex Gigas is unlike anything else in medieval manuscript tradition. Full-page illuminated portraits in manuscripts of this period almost always depict saints, biblical figures, or Christ. The Codex Gigas contains several conventional illuminations of this kind. Then, in the middle of the manuscript, with no apparent contextual reason, there is a full-page image of the devil. He is red. He stands upright with his arms raised, clawed hands extended outward. His tongue protrudes. His eyes are large and direct. He wears a garment that art historians describe as an ermine-trimmed robe, the kind worn by royalty or high nobility in medieval depictions. He is not cowering. He is not defeated. He is not depicted in the context of damnation or punishment or divine triumph over evil. He is simply present, occupying the full page, facing outward. Directly opposite this portrait, on the facing page, is an illustration of the heavenly city, Jerusalem, heaven on one side, the devil on the other, and between them, the rest of the book. Medieval scholars have offered various interpretations. The devil as a reminder of what the manuscript's contents protect against. The portrait as a theological statement about the nature of evil as the opposite of the divine. The facing page composition as a deliberate meditation on the choice that underlies all of Christian theology. What none of them fully account for is the portrait's tone. The devil in the Codex Gigas does not look like he lost. The science. In 2007, a team of researchers undertook a comprehensive scientific analysis of the Codex Gigas. They examined the vellum, the ink composition, the handwriting, the illumination style, and the microscopic wear patterns on the writing instruments. Their goal was to determine, as precisely as possible, when the manuscript was created and by how many hands. The answer to the first question was a range of roughly 1204 to 1230, placing the manuscript's creation in the early 13th century, consistent with the historical period of the Podlavis monastery. The answer to the second question was the one that generated the most attention. One person wrote the entire text, all 620 pages. every word of the complete Latin Bible, every entry in the historical chronicles, every line of the medical texts and the calendar. The handwriting, examined across the full manuscript with modern imaging technology, shows no variation consistent with multiple scribes. It shows the gradual variation consistent with a single person's hand across an extended period of writing. This does not prove the devil. It proves the opposite, in a sense. A team of scribes working simultaneously could have produced this manuscript quickly. One person working alone required years. The analysis estimated between 20 and 30 years of sustained work at a normal pace, which means either the single night legend is exactly that, a legend, a story that accrued to a manuscript that was genuinely remarkable for the more mundane reason of being a decades-long solo project. Or there is a third option that the analysis cannot address. One person, one night, something that made the normal pace of human effort temporarily inapplicable. The science establishes the single author. It cannot establish the timeline. The vellum and ink analysis can place the manuscript's completion within a 26-year window. It cannot place it within a single night. What it confirms, definitively, is that the manuscript is exactly what it appears to be: the largest, most comprehensive product of a single human effort in the history of medieval writing. The question of how one human being did remains open. The manuscript's journey. The Codex Gigas spent the first 4 centuries of its existence in Bohemia, passing between monasteries as the region changed hands, survived religious wars, and shifted through the political convulsions of Central European history. In 1594, it came to the attention of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, who was himself an occultist, an alchemist, and a collector of unusual objects. One of the great obsessives of the 16th century, Rudolf had the manuscript brought to his court in Prague. He kept it in his personal collection. Rudolf II died in 1612. His collections were inherited by his successors. The Codex Gigas remained in Prague until 1648. When Swedish forces besieged the city at the end of the 30 Years' War, when the Swedish army sacked the imperial collections, the Codex Gigas was among the war trophies carried back to Stockholm. A surviving account from the siege records that during the withdrawal, the castle where the collections were stored caught fire. A soldier threw the Codex Gigas from a window to save it from the flames. The soldier survived. The manuscript survived. A person on the ground below, struck by a falling 165-pound book, did not. The Codex Gigas has been in Stockholm since 1649. The National Library of Sweden keeps it in a climate-controlled case. It is available for viewing. Researchers with appropriate credentials can request access. The Czech Republic has formally requested its return multiple times. Sweden has declined. 800 years, 2 countries, 1 war, 1 fire, 1 defenestration. The Codex Gigas has outlasted everything that has tried to stop it from existing, which for a manuscript produced in the early 13th century is in itself deeply unusual. The survival rate for manuscripts of that period is poor. Most were lost to fire, flood, deliberate destruction, or simple neglect. The ones that survived did so because someone repeatedly, over centuries, made an active decision to preserve them. The Codex Gigas has had a lot of protectors. Why that is, whether it reflects the manuscript's genuine historical value or the discomfort of being the person who lets the devil's Bible get destroyed on your watch, is a question worth sitting with. The largest manuscript in the world, written, possibly, in a single night. The portrait of the devil, unchanged on folio 290, still facing outward, still not looking like he lost.
Okay, continuing on with the pact with the devil, we might as well start at the beginning. So this is the original Pact with the Devil story. This is Theophilus of Adana. This story, Goethe and Christopher Marlowe both supposedly were inspired by this story to write their stories of Faust, or Dr. Faustus, Dr. Faust. So this is Theophilus, and then and we might actually talk about the other two, Goethe and Marlowe as well. And then I will see you on the other side with some more pacts with the devil that you may or may not have heard, or you may or may not have realized were pacts with the devil. So I'll see you at the other side of the recording.
You know the story of Faust, the scholar who trades his soul to the devil for unlimited knowledge and worldly pleasure. The deal that seemed worth it until it wasn't. The story that Marlowe told, that Goethe refined, that 2,000 years of Western culture have been retelling in different forms ever since. What you probably don't know is that Faust is not the original. The original soul-selling story involves a bishop. In the 6th century, in what is now southern Turkey, his name was Theophilus of Adana, and the deal he made and what happened afterward is documented in historical sources that predate Goethe by 1,300 years. This is where the story actually starts. Who Theophilus was. Theophilus was the archdeacon of the church at Adana, a city in the region of Cilicia, in the 6th century. He was, by all accounts in the historical record, genuinely good at his job. He was respected, he was trusted. He was offered the position of bishop when his bishop died, and he declined it on the grounds that he did not consider himself worthy of the office. The position went to someone else. Then the new bishop decided he didn't like Theophilus. He stripped him of his position as archdeacon. He removed him from the church's administration entirely. After a career of genuine service and deliberate humility, Theophilus found himself with nothing. The specific emotion the historical accounts ascribe to him at this point is not anger. It is despair. The loss of his position was also the loss of his purpose, his identity, his place in the structure that had organized his entire life. Into that despair, a figure appeared. The transaction. The figure was identified in later accounts as a Jewish sorcerer, which reflects the anti-Semitic framing of medieval hagiography rather than any historical reality. But the function of the character is clear. An intermediary, someone who could arrange an introduction. The introduction was to the devil. The meeting, according to the accounts, took place at night in an open field. The devil offered Theophilus a straightforward transaction, his soul in exchange for the return of his position and the destruction of his enemy. Theophilus agreed. He signed the contract, in writing, with his name. What happened next proceeded exactly as agreed. The bishop who had removed him died. Theophilus was reinstated. He rose higher than he had ever been. He became, in worldly terms, everything he had lost and more. And then, 7 years later, he couldn't sleep. The repentance. The accounts of what happened to Theophilus after the contract are structured as a conversion story, which is the genre that preserved them. But the psychological portrait they sketch is striking. He had what he wanted. The transaction had delivered, and it destroyed him anyway. He spent the 7 years following the pact in increasing torment, not punishment, not supernatural retribution, but the simple, grinding weight of knowing what he had done and what it meant. He began fasting. He began praying, which the accounts note had a certain bitter irony, given the specific entity he had contracted with. He made his way to a church dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and spent 40 days in prostrate supplication. On the 40th day, the accounts say, Mary appeared to him. She was not pleased, but she interceded. She descended, by the accounts framing, into hell itself, and recovered the signed contract from the devil. 3 days later, Theophilus woke to find the contract on his chest. He brought it to the bishop. He confessed publicly. He died 3 days later, which the accounts present as a mercy. His soul freed from the contract, and his death following quickly enough that nothing else could complicate matters. Why it matters. The story of Theophilus of Adana was everywhere in medieval Europe. It appeared in Greek, Latin, French, German, and English. It was told in homilies, depicted in church art, included in collections of saints' lives. Hroswitha of Gandersheim wrote a dramatic version in the 10th century. The story appears in stained glass windows in Chartres Cathedral. It is the template. Every soul-selling story that followed, Faust, Dorian Gray, Robert Johnson at the Crossroads, the deals made in the Grand Grimoire, all of them are built on the structure that the Theophilus story established. The moment of desperation. The offer that seems to address that desperation precisely. The cost that only becomes fully visible later. The question of whether any of it is reversible. Faust gets the credit because Goethe was a better writer than a 6th century church scribe. But the deal, the specific shape of the transaction, and what it does to the person who makes it, was documented 900 years before Goethe was born, in a city in southern Turkey, by a bishop who should have known better, and probably did.
Okay, one of the things about pacts with the devil, knowing how horribly bad they turn out, I'm pretty confident that me personally, I would never do it. Like if the devil appeared to me right now and said, you can have all these riches and everything for 20 years, but the price is your immortal soul forever, I would be like, no thank you. I'll just be poor and stupid and destitute for 20 years and die and go to heaven. Thank you very much. It just seems kind of bizarre that anybody would take a pact with the devil with just you're talking about eternity here. So you're talking about for the smidgen of time that you'll never remember. Eternity is eternity. There's no redemption. I don't know. It's just, to me, it's like why would you do that? It's like it wouldn't be worth it. So anyway, there's some other stories in that writers have come up with that have been the pact with the devil story. There's, of course, from Theophilus, we had the Faust story, or we had Christopher Marlowe, and we have Goethe. Is it Goethe? Goethe. And then, of course, you have some stories that you might not realize are pacts with the devil. It might not be the actual devil, but we have a picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now, in this story, of course, Dorian Gray, his pact it seems to work as he looks at the portrait, and the portrait takes the damage of age instead of Dorian Gray, and so it's a style of pact, and I explain it in the video what I'm talking about here. Then you have the Master and Margarita, which is another story from Russia, which touches on the Pact with the Devil story. And then once we get done with that, we'll start talking about some books that people have either, might have been unalived because of, or that may have been caused to be unalived because of them. Anyway, so let's talk about these other stories, and I will talk to you when we get to the other side of the video.
Theophilus made his deal in the 6th century, and the story spread across medieval Europe because it answered a question that theology couldn't fully resolve. Is it reversible? Every religious tradition has rules about the soul. Most of them include at least the theoretical possibility of redemption. But the soul-selling story sits right at the edge of that possibility, asking what happens when the transaction is completed in writing, with full knowledge, for reasons that are entirely understandable. Literature took that question and ran with it. For the last 500 years, writers have been building variations on the same structure, each one probing a different aspect of what it means to get exactly what you wanted and discover too late what it cost. These are the three versions that defined everything that followed. Faust. Christopher Marlowe wrote the first major Faust in 1592. Goethe spent 60 years writing the definitive one, publishing the first part in 1808 and the second in 1832, the year he died. The core of the Faust story is a scholar, a man who has mastered every discipline available to him, and who finds that mastery has produced nothing but the certainty that there is more he cannot reach. He is not corrupted or weak. He is too capable. He has gone as far as human effort will take him and arrived at his ceiling. The devil, in Goethe's version called Mephistopheles, offers to remove the ceiling. What makes Goethe's version philosophically different from every predecessor is the specific terms of the deal. Faust does not sell his soul for wealth or power or the destruction of enemies. He bets his soul on a proposition that the devil cannot produce a moment of such complete satisfaction that Faust will want time to stop. If such a moment arrives, Faust loses. Mephistopheles is confident it will come. He has been watching humans long enough to know that the thing they most want is always the thing that destroys them when they get it. The argument Goethe builds across two enormous plays is about whether striving itself, the ceaseless human drive toward the unreachable, is redemptive or self-destructive. He comes down barely on the side of redemptive. Faust is saved. Most readers find the ending unsatisfying, which is probably the point. Dorian Gray. Oscar Wilde published The Picture of Dorian Gray in 1890. The novel was immediately attacked as immoral, decadent, and corrupting. It was used as evidence against Wilde in his trial for gross indecency in 1895. He was convicted. He died in 1900 in a Paris hotel, bankrupt and broken, 3 years after his release from prison. The soul-selling structure in Dorian Gray is transposed. There is no devil. There is a beautiful young man, a corrupt aesthete who teaches him that beauty and sensation are the only things worth pursuing, and a portrait painted at the height of Dorian's youth. Dorian wishes casually that the portrait could age in his place. The wish is granted. By what agency the novel never specifies. What follows is a portrait of what happens when consequence is suspended. Dorian remains young and beautiful. The portrait absorbs every cruelty, every corruption, every moral deterioration. He becomes capable of anything because nothing shows. And the novel tracks, with considerable precision, a specific way that immunity from consequence does not produce freedom. It produces emptiness, then cruelty, then something that cannot be named in the vocabulary of the story's surface. When Dorian finally attempts to destroy the portrait and end the transaction, he destroys himself instead. Wilde's version of the deal removes the supernatural middleman and the theological stakes. What remains is the psychological portrait of what unlimited license actually produces. He wrote it while living it, by most biographical accounts. The novel knows what it's describing from the inside. A Master and Margarita. Mikhail Bulgakov wrote The Master and Margarita between 1930 and his death in 1940. He revised it continuously. He never saw it published. It appeared in censored form in a Soviet literary magazine in 1966, 26 years after his death. The complete version was published in 1973. The novel opens with the devil arriving in Stalin's Moscow in the form of a foreign professor named Woland. He is accompanied by a retinue that includes a giant talking black cat who drinks vodka and plays chess. They proceed to cause chaos specifically targeted at the Soviet cultural apparatus, the writers' union, the theater management, the bureaucrats of official culture, the people whose job it was to decide what other people were allowed to think. The devil in Bulgakov's version is not particularly interested in souls. He is interested in exposing cowardice. In Moscow in 1930, cowardice had a very specific face. The people who knew what was true and said what was safe. Woland simply makes the consequences of that choice visible. The parallel narrative concerns Pontius Pilate and his encounter with Yeshua, Bulgakov's version of Jesus, a philosopher who will not say what is safe, who tells Pilate the truth directly and pays for it. The novel's argument is that the only real transaction, the only deal that matters, is the one you make with your own conscience. Bulgakov wrote this while Stalin's regime was reading his mail. He burned an early draft, then rewrote it from memory. He reportedly said to his wife, near the end of his life, that manuscripts don't burn. He was right. The book survived him by decades. 3 versions of the same story. 3 different answers to the question Theophilus raised in the 6th century. Goethe says striving redeems you, even if the deal destroys you. Wilde says immunity from consequence doesn't grant you freedom. It grants you the ability to destroy yourself more completely. Bulgakov says the real deal with the devil isn't a contract signed at a crossroads. It's the smaller, daily transaction of knowing what's true and choosing silence. All three authors paid a price for writing what they wrote. Wilde was imprisoned. Bulgakov was suppressed. Goethe was dismissed as a romantic fool by the rationalists of his era, which for a man of his ego was probably worse. Literature keeps returning to this story because the question at its center doesn't resolve. What would you trade for what you can't reach by ordinary means? And who exactly would you be afterward?
Okay, the next book we're going to be talking about tonight is going to be one by Gustav Gilbert, and he was the psychologist at the beginning of the video. At the beginning of this entire video, I told you that we're going to talk to a psychologist who interviewed war criminals. Well, it's Gustav Gilbert who interviewed like Goering and some other people at the trial of Nuremberg, and he interviewed them, and then he told the story in a book as accurately as he could, and people didn't like what he had to say. So that's the first book we're going to talk about, and then we'll come back after that and talk about something that even when I was young I thought that's a wild story, but we'll get to that after we talk about Gustav Gilbert next.
Everything we have examined tonight has operated at some distance from the real world. Grimoires, legends, literary metaphors. A manuscript that may or may not have been written in a single night by a monk who may or may not have sold his soul. These are stories. Important ones, disturbing ones, but stories. This segment is different. This segment is about a psychologist who sat down with the architects of the Holocaust and asked them questions they had never been asked before, and about what happened when he tried to publish the answers. Gustav Gilbert. Gustav Gilbert was an American military psychologist assigned to the Nuremberg trials in 1945. His job was clinical: assess the mental competency of the defendants, determine whether they were fit to stand trial. What he was given in the course of doing that job was something no psychologist had ever had before: direct sustained access to Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, Albert Speer, Wilhelm Keitel, and the rest of the surviving senior leadership of the Nazi regime. During the months between their capture and their verdicts, he did his clinical assessments. And then he kept going. He recorded conversations. He administered IQ tests. He observed the defendants' reactions to the trial evidence, including the film footage of the concentration camps shown in the courtroom. He wrote down what they said when they thought they were speaking privately. He documented the specific psychological mechanisms by which men of considerable intelligence had participated in, facilitated, and in some cases designed the murder of millions of people. His book, Nuremberg Diary, published in 1947, contains the most direct psychological portrait of that leadership that exists. It includes Göring's own explanation of how ordinary populations are made to support wars they don't want. It includes the reactions of the defendants to the evidence of what they had done. It includes conversations that the men in question would, if they had survived, almost certainly have preferred not to see in print. The attempts to suppress it. Nuremberg Diary did not face the kind of suppression that burns books publicly. It faced the quieter kind. Gilbert's access to the defendants was disputed after publication. Other figures involved in the trials challenged his account, his methods, his qualifications. His right to publish material obtained in what they characterized as a clinical rather than journalistic context. A campaign was conducted, primarily through academic and legal channels, to discredit the book and its author. The specific target was Göring's explanation of how to build popular support for war. A passage so precise in its description of the mechanism of manufactured consent that it has been quoted continuously ever since. The attempt to discredit that passage, to cast doubt on whether Göring said it, whether Gilbert recorded it accurately, whether the context changed its meaning, occupied considerable effort for several years after publication. The passage survived. The book survived. Gilbert's reputation sustained damage that followed him through his academic career. The book is still in print. That specific passage is quoted in political science courses, in journalism schools, in histories of propaganda. The people who tried to bury it made it more visible. The pattern. Gilbert's book is one example of a pattern that runs through the history of documentation. The books most aggressively suppressed are not usually the ones containing forbidden rituals or dangerous technical information. They are the ones containing accurate testimony, the ones where someone with access to the truth wrote it down and did not soften it. The diary of a young girl was hidden in an annex wall. The Gulag Archipelago was written in secret, circulated in hand-copied manuscripts, smuggled out of the Soviet Union. Emil Zola's J'accuse, the open letter that exposed the wrongful conviction of Alfred Dreyfus, resulted in Zola's criminal prosecution for libel. He was convicted. He fled France. All of these documents shared one quality that made them targets. They were accurate, and the people they implicated were still powerful. The grimoires we've examined tonight were feared because of what they might summon. These documents were feared because of what they already contained. The price paid for accurate testimony has been historically very high: prison, exile, death, the long, grinding institutional effort to discredit the witness, dispute the record, and make people uncertain enough about the facts that they stop looking. It works often enough that people keep trying it. It doesn't work permanently. The books survive. The testimony survives. The names of the people who tried to destroy it survive as well, attached to the historical record of what they were trying to hide. That is the thing about books that document the truth. They're very hard to kill.
Okay, my next banned book story is kind of wild. And when I was a kid, I heard about this guy, and I was thinking, who's that guy? It was Salman Rushdie, and I'd heard that the Ayatollah Khomeini had issued a fatwa for his death and all this stuff, and they're going after him. And the name of the book was the Satanic Verses. And when I was a kid, I was thinking, oh man, he's a Satanist, and everybody hates him, so they should catch that guy. I had no idea about Islam or any of that kind of stuff. So when I started looking into it, it kept popping up on dangerous books lists. Like whenever I was looking up dangerous books for content for Illuminated Infamy, it kept popping up, and I'm like, okay, so I'll look into it. And then I found out it was just kind of even though it was named the Satanic Verses, it was just kind of a regular novel. Now, I still haven't read it. I don't know if I ever will read it, but I found out that people did lose their lives because of it. Translators, specifically 2 translators. And then Salman Rushdie actually came out of hiding when he thought everything was, okay and legit, and was attacked by, of all things, an American, which is bizarre. But so this is a bizarre story. So we'll go ahead and let you get through it, and then I will see you on the other side of the video.
On February 14th, 1989, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran, issued a fatwa. He declared that Salman Rushdie, a British Indian novelist, was to be killed, that any Muslim who had the ability to carry out this execution was religiously obligated to do so, that a cash bounty, eventually reaching several $1 million, would be paid to whoever succeeded. The crime was a novel, not a political manifesto, not a work of propaganda. A novel published 5 months earlier that had sold modestly and received positive literary reviews. What followed was the most sustained international assassination campaign in the history of publishing. The book, The Satanic Verses, was published in September 1988. Salman Rushdie was already a celebrated author. His novel Midnight's Children had won the Booker Prize in 1981. The new book was ambitious, surrealistic, difficult, the kind of literary novel that wins prizes and is discussed in graduate seminars. It contained 2 dream sequences experienced by one of its characters, an Indian actor who is losing his mind. In these dream sequences, A character who resembles the Prophet Muhammad receives revelations that are later declared to be false, inserted by the devil. The Satanic verses of the title refers to this theological concept, a genuine historical debate within Islamic scholarship about a brief episode in early Islamic history. Rushdie was using that debate as literary material. His intent, he stated repeatedly, was to explore questions of religious doubt and the nature of divine revelation through the lens of a character's psychological deterioration. The intent did not matter. The response. Within months of publication, the book had been banned in India, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, South Africa, and several other countries. Protests were held. In Bradford, England, a copy was publicly burned. In Pakistan, 5 protesters were killed by police during a demonstration. Then came the fatwa. Rushdie went into hiding. The British government assigned him special branch protection. He moved constantly, never sleeping 2 consecutive nights in the same location for the next decade. He published under the name Joseph Anton, a pseudonym combining the first names of Conrad and Chekhov. The people connected to the book paid a different price. Hitoshi Igarashi, the Japanese translator, was stabbed to death at his university office in 1991. Ettore Capriolo, the Italian translator, was stabbed and seriously wounded the same month. Aziz Nesin, the Turkish translator, survived an arson attack on a hotel in 1993. 35 other people in the hotel did not. William Nygaard, the Norwegian publisher, was shot 3 times outside his home in 1993. He survived. None of these people had written the book. They had translated it or published it. The network of violence extended to everyone who had touched the text professionally, in any country where a copy existed. The aftermath. In 1998, the Iranian government officially distanced itself from the fatwa, stating that it would not encourage anyone to carry out the killing. The fatwa itself was never formally rescinded. Under Islamic legal tradition, a fatwa issued by a deceased religious authority cannot be withdrawn. Rushdie came out of hiding. He resumed public life, married, wrote more books, received a knighthood in 2007, which triggered a fresh round of protests and renewed calls for his death in several countries. In August 2022, a man rushed the stage at a literary festival in upstate New York and stabbed Rushdie in the face, neck, and torso. Rushdie survived, losing the sight of one eye and the use of one hand, 34 years after the fatwa, at a literary festival in the United States. The attacker, a 24-year-old American man, stated in a jailhouse interview that he had read roughly 2 pages of the Satanic verses. The story of the Satanic verses is not really about the book. It is about what happens when the idea of a book becomes more powerful than its contents. Most of the people who burned copies of the Satanic verses had not read it. Most of the people who called for Rushdie's death had not read it. The attacker who nearly killed him in 2022 had read 2 pages. The book had become a symbol of something that could not be addressed through reading, discussion, or disagreement. It had become a test of loyalty that required a physical response. This is the endpoint of what happens when a society decides that certain ideas cannot be permitted to exist. You don't end up burning books. You end up stabbing the people who wrote them. 34 years later, at a literary festival in America.
Okay, bizarre, lose his eye and stuff because of writing a novel and then have to be in hiding anyway. Can't imagine writing a book and then have to go into hiding for it. All right, well, that's it for this evening or this afternoon or this morning, whenever you're seeing this video. Right now, I'm working on content. I'm going to use my own visage in these videos. I've got a few more that I'm coming up with. Let me know in the comments if you like this video and you like this long length and you like me actually speaking to you instead of just all AI voice. And like I said, I do use the AI voice for consistency. if you want to hear me with narrate these myself with my own voice, you can let me know that as well. I don't know why you would, but if you do, if you don't like the AI, that's fine. I can understand that, and I can do it myself. In the future, in the very near future, I'm going to start doing some live streams where we can actually talk about this stuff. And you can join in that. I was just kind of waiting for the sub list to get a little bit higher so that people would actually show up. I don't want to do live streams where it's just me talking to myself. So anyway, let me know. And I got my candles and stuff over here for atmosphere later on with the live shows, so we can kind of get spooky and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so this was the first time I did this long form video. All the videos were expanded from shorts that were wildly popular on the channel. I've got some more that are going to come up soon, and let me know if what you want to see on the channel. I'll be glad to research it. Until then, I'm Mark Tyson, your slightly dangerous professor, and I will sign off. Thank you very much for watching.